Bengenda。これからは俺がみんなを守る。
Ben Bigger is the agent most commonly seen at the bottom of tier lists for his ambiguous class identity and mediocrity. Those who try to play him in endgame content often struggle their way through it, but if you watched any of my content, you would know that Ben can truly live up to his title as the Beast King. It's about time that I teach you the ways of Ben, everything from his history, kit, combos, strategy, teams, and equipment, so that anyone can master him too. Welcome to the Ben Bigger Masterclass. My name is Professor Rack, and I'll be guiding you through today's lesson. Class is now in session. Let's begin. Ben is a defense agent, someone whose role doesn't have any one defining feature, who is typically known for supporting, even though he was undeniably inadequate for that role. It wasn't until after 2.0 that many people began to accept Ben more as a damage dealer by the nature of his kit and playstyle. So, what exactly is DPS Ben? In many gacha games, a player can highly invest into a character whose main role is typically not about doing the most damage relative to others, with the purpose of making them powerful enough for in-game content with high personal damage per second. As someone who gets the most enjoyment out of gacha games, turning non-traditional attackers into high damage dealers, I put most of my effort into building Ben, a defense agent, and showcasing him as a DPS agent. In the context it's endless, this would include getting them a disk drive set and engine designer on high personal damage, use teammates that provide powerful buffs to that agent, and develop strategies that best suit their game plan. This does not usually differ from how you would build an actual DPS agent like Evelyn or Soldier Zero. Since Ben has limited options to work with and has a lower power budget, there are cases where he does not deal the most damage, so it would be more accurate to call him an on-field or burst DPS, where he mainly deals damage through block counters, defensive assists, or some rotations, while the other agent, like Orphe, would be considered an off-field or aftershock DPS for more consistent damage and synergy. While it can feel disappointing to have to supplement Ben's lack of damage, he is not a character you can easily pick up. It requires a lot of discipline to master, but it can work eventually. So, allow me to help you better understand DPS Ben and learn how to tackle endgame content with him. Let's take a look at who Ben is, starting from the very beginning. To understand the Ben of today, we must first understand the Ben of the past. In the first closed beta test in August 2022, Ben was one of the 12 playable agents, being the only defense agent at the time. Since agent roles hadn't fully been developed yet, Ben wasn't held back by his role. In fact, he was quite viable as a damage dealer. He was well rewarded for performing perfect block counters, which were buffed by his talents, something we would associate with landscapes today. His first talent reduced enemy defense by 15% for performing a perfect block counter, a utility Ben mains today would dream of having since we know just how good defense reduction is, like with Nicole. His second talent boosted his EX special damage by 15%, or by 30% when there were 3 enemies in combat, which further designated him as a damage support by clearing large groups of enemies with sweeping strikes, a trait that wasn't very common, yet would add to the enjoyment of playing such a big and strong agent. Talents 3 and 4 is where things take a strange turn, boosting his saves by 15% after an assist attack, and another 50% after a perfect block counter, which meant he was not only good at clearing groups of enemies, but was also well rewarded for playing like an on-field stunner. These types of traits would somewhat persist in the following CPTs and into the present day, but there's more to the story than just that. Ben, just like the defense class, had quite the identity crisis in the second closed beta test in November 2023. For an A rank, he was like a jack of all trades, but oftentimes better than a master of one for how unbalanced he was. Ben took his role as a tank a bit too seriously, blocking enemy attacks and dishing it back so hard that the other agents could sit back comfortably while he did all the work. His special and EX special counters, chain, and ult all did exceptional damage, and if you kept going for block counters, you'd be doing more DPS than the likes of Billy or some S-rank agents. While he still kept the same talents from CBT1, more of his kit gravitated towards being a support in an unexpected way. The first part of his additional ability boosted anomaly buildup against the enemy by 75% after an EX special or assist attack, if he was with another fire agent. Since there weren't any fire anomaly agents and burn damage was so low, he was most likely to support Inferno Metal for his Soldier 11. The second part provided a shield up to 16% of his max HP if he was with another strike agent, implying that he also wanted to be paired with Kaleda, which would fulfill both fire and strike requirements.
Hey, don't look down on me!
As a matter of fact, Kaleda's additional ability would increase Burn's damage by 22.5%, stacking up to 2 times, solidifying their synergy together with Soldier 11, as well as benefiting from coordinated attacks with Ben for more days and damage. What's unfortunate is that Ben couldn't build the anomaly meter very well since he had many physical damage skills, a low fire application rate, and the coordinated attacks only worked on Kaleda, so he couldn't take advantage of these abilities by himself. He would ultimately either be the sidekick to Kaleda with shielding and support effects that aren't impressive, or selfishly try to take the glory for himself with high counter damage. In CBT3, April 2024, Ben would mostly be finalized into what we know of him today, a big clunky bear that is capable of decent damage, but has mostly been nerfed, including his stun and support capabilities. While Ben was more balanced, he lost much of his identity, with most of what's left being block counters and shielding, leaving much to be desired. Even tier lists at the time highlighted how clunky and low value he was overall, partially due to bugs, but more significantly relying on Kaleda to be functional, who continues to be low value. People would mostly build him as a subpar support or a stunner, using a signature, big cylinder, and defaulting to investing entirely into defense to help him deal more counter damage. Those who knew of his potential mostly gave up on him by this point, but others had picked up the mantle left behind. The release of Zenless in July 2024 would become the start of my and others' journey to turn Ben into the most calculated killing machine possible. With the right information and dedication from the community, DPS Ben would eventually come to fruition once again, and better than ever. Let's get familiar with Ben's kit as he stands today. Ben is a guardian who patiently defends against enemy attacks before bashing them head-on when they reveal their weakness. His accounting skills help him to fight efficiently, utilizing up to 80% of his defense as attack, allowing him to block and counterattack with explosive power. His love of caviar boosts his energy regeneration, enabling him to capitalize on his EX specials, which come with incredible damage multipliers and buffs thanks to his precisely tuned oil engine pillar. Ben's EX special absorbs all incoming damage when he raises his pillar just before the enemy strikes, causing them to stagger from the enemy's propulsion and leave a wide opening for a follow-up attack. With his pillar acting as a counterbalance, he can swing it around with such force that it rapidly knocks out a large group of enemies, or he can use the engine to aggressively propel himself towards the enemy while they're too stunned to react. These carefully planned follow-ups provide his team with the overflowing wealth of a 16% crit rate buff for 30 seconds, or while the shield is active, making it easier for his team to demolish their foes safely. If Ben runs out of energy, he'll strike with basic attacks and dodge counters to regain momentum for the next calculated opening. His swings may be slow, but his mighty leap helps him avoid enemy attacks and set on their face. Drive his pillar into them. Slams their face into the ground. When he's not actively tanking, he's using his risk allocation skills to prepare for the right moment to quickly assist his allies or swoop in to block the attack. His defensive assists have great daze and damage value, which can be used more often because of his strength and efficiency, helping to build up rage for his ultimate attack. As Ben's team fights, his primal rage rises until he can no longer contain it. While the enemy is immobilized, he dishes out the complete payback they deserve, spreading a massive blaze of pain and destruction from the impact of his engine at max power.
You should've worn a hard hat!
Ben's fury cools down, and he is ready to support his team again with 3 refresh assist points. Ben often practices by facing various enemies in the hollow, studying enemy patterns to make his movements more efficient to maintain his status as the king of beasts. To him, it's like therapy, facing his problems head-on until they can no longer bother him and his friends who he cares so much about. What else is there to Ben's combat potential? Ben's kit implies that he wants to be primarily played on field, building energy for block counters and EX follow-ups to increase his days and support his team with a shield. While that may have sufficed in 1.0, the playstyle has evolved now that many powerful agents have joined the roster to better fulfill stun and support roles. Ben currently plays more like Evelyn, building energy and resources occasionally as an on-field DPS, and coordinating an appropriately timed stun to release as much burst damage as possible within the stun window. Much of the skill expression comes from optimizing the quick-swap playstyle, strategically animation cancelling to build energy and refresh essential buffs, and creating opportunities for high burst damage in the form of combos. Ben's quick-swap playstyle leads to diverse rotations where every agent is contributing damage, and each kit is utilized intrinsically to influence the route, not just focusing on the main DPS like with SREC agents. Resource management is more important than ever, because when stun rotations make up the majority of damage dealt to bosses, and with a limited stun time available, performing the most optimal rotation will give you some of the best results. There are plenty of ways to make Ben's field time more effective and fluid in each playstyle, so let's go over them, starting with his combos. Ben is not complex like other attacker rupture agents because he does not have a second resource meter or stacks to keep track of, besides Woodbeggar, but true to his nature, he has a big appetite for energy. Despite his slowness, there are many ways to make his combat more efficient with combos and animation cancels to alleviate the issues of energy generation and capitalize on his burst damage. His shortcut combos are from his EX block counter or dash attack into basic attack 2 and 3, which are great for burst damage and energy recovery. You know you did a perfect EX block counter if you hear this sound. which does work on projectiles, and you can essentially keep chain interrupting bosses like Pompey and prevent him from ever going immune. Just make sure his pillar actually hits the ground before releasing EX, because you can accidentally skip that part of the animation, which is over a third of his damage. EX block counters are stronger than the EX follow-up because of his M2 and M4, as well as being more sustainable, enabling you to play Ben around his counters more unless you need to activate the crit buff, which is ideal for his on-field playstyle. It's also nearly as strong as an EX and stun, but unless you're going to overcap on energy, it's better to save it for the stun rotation to avoid using much of that limited time basic attacking, since we all know a 50% increase of a small number is still a small number. In the case you're looking to maximize block counter damage with Woodpecker, make sure to build 2 stacks from a basic attack and dodge counter beforehand. For example, if the boss is about to perform a multi-hit attack, dodge counter the first strike, then block counter the second. It's generally good practice to almost always keep some energy in reserve to be ready for attacks on the fly, even if he is the on-field DPS. Don't get fooled by the special block counter, because even though it's decent damage compared to the dodge counter, it doesn't build energy, Woodpecker stacks, stagger the enemy, and it comes with more end lag. Ben thrives the most when he uses animation cancelling to take advantage of his slower attacks, which is when you swap to another agent to use their skill while the previous agent is still performing their attack. A couple of Ben's best skills to animation cancel are his basic attack 3 and EX follow-up, since they put him in a long and avoidable animation and come with high motion values. Basic attack 3 is quite convenient, as it can be swapped out of it as soon as he starts to pull his weapon back, and it builds a lot of energy, kinda like Sukaku in the Mono Ice team. He does lose invulnerability as he's about to land, but if he's still the active agent, you can animation cancel the landing with a dodge or block counter. Basic attack 1 can be utilized similarly by starting the swing animation before swapping out to the next agent, like after a defensive assist or dodge counter, which helps to generate energy and refresh your Woodpecker stack, but you could dash attack instead for more aggressive energy generation. You'll be surprised by how much energy he'll have by the stun phase if you incorporate these tricks wherever you can. Another animation cancel comes from a trick called dodge assisting. This is when you dodge counter a defensive assist in rapid succession during a single enemy attack, which is beneficial for decibels, energy, damage, and Woodpecker uptime, especially when you can't fit in a basic 3 instead. However, it's mainly utilized for dealing miasma shield damage since you're forcing in more counters to break it faster, and even if you can't defensive assist, you can still use the same technique at 2 dodge counters out of the same attack with a much more generous activation window. It's possible to do block assisting, where you instead perform a perfect block counter and immediately assist the same attack, but it's really tough to land outside of long or red flash attacks, so I don't recommend it unless you're trying to dump energy anyways before the miasma shield breaks. While his EX block counter is stronger from miasma damage than most others' EX, it's still worse than his dodge counter, which is free, though it could be useful if you plan to EX follow-up, which will boost his day's output through M6 as he's basic attacking and dodge countering. Other than that, you'll see animation cancels utilized a lot in like stun rotations to effectively overlap as many skills as possible to maximize DPS with the accumulated resources. One that isn't often used but saves a lot of time is to dodge forward from his chain attack knockback to keep the gap closed. Just make sure to give him a slight pause for him to land so you don't accidentally dash attack instead of basic attack. This trick was common back when double chain was considered optimal, but if your supports are well built enough or if you still need more decibels, using all 3 is better and doesn't sacrifice much damage. Many of you might know of the Lucy chain tech, where in this case you would use lighter quick assist before Lucy's chain landed to use Ben chain twice, though it depends on the boss being small enough and having space around it, and you lose lighter quick assist, which means he'll have to wait for the next defensive assist to use morale without sacrificing damage bonus. While chain attacks are great damage sources by themselves, there are more ways to make them stronger with the help of manual chain for more consistent buff management. You essentially begin stun with your Stunner's EX for King of the Summit, quick swap to your support to refresh their buffs, then swap to Ben to use basic 1 for the first Woodpecker stack, EX for the second, and EX follow-up for the crit buff, always making sure it's active for the rotation regardless of disc choice. The manual chain strategy allows Ben to use an extra EX special or 2 in the stun rotation thanks to his energy regen and the help of basic attacks used to refresh Woodpecker. Since Ben is very reliant on his EXs to deal burst damage, you would ideally go into stuns with a full energy meter, so try to fit in some of Ben's animation cancels wherever you can, and be mindful of his energy consumption. Many of the optimal stun rotations I developed are strict, and require a lot of practice to understand when exactly to animation cancel, so let's take a look at how some of Ben's rotations should be performed on a case-by-case basis. While there are over 50 possible Ben teams, I'll just be going over the important ones that are commonly used. It is imperative that you take the time to learn one, since it'll help you have the most damage output possible, just like you would with Bonnie Wei combos. Starting with Dylan Orphe, trigger stun with Dylan's EX to refresh King of the Summit and her additional ability, then quick swap to Orphe to use Heat Charge, quick assist with Ben, and use basic 1, EX1 and EX2 for 2 Woodpecker stacks and Ben's crit buff. Chain attack order should be Dylan chain first, which refreshes King of the Summit again, then Ben chain, which is upgraded into his ult, finally Orphe chain, immediately followed by Orphe ult. After Ben quick assist, refresh Woodpecker again with basic 1, EX1, EX2, and then ults, all of which should land within the duration of zeroed in. Next, use basic 1 and 2, which triggers Orphe's Aftershock, then quickswap to Orphe on her descent to use heat charge and Ben quick assist. This will end the stun rotation with zeroed in refreshed, and Ben active to basic attack for energy. If you change the team order to have dial in after Orphe to strengthen her EXs, then you'll simply need a quick swap to Ben after dial in quick assist. Here's how the rotation would look. Glider Orphe is executed very similarly to Dial in Orphe since they both have a stun extension. First, I start the stun with Glider's EX for King of the Summit, animation cancel with Orphe's heat charge, and quick assist with Ben. Next, use basic 1, EX1, and EX2 for Woodpecker and his crit buff, letting Ben trigger the chain attacks. The chain sequence is Glider's chain first, which refreshes King of the Summit, then Ben chain while Woodpecker is still active, and Orphe's chain last so that she can immediately ult and quick assist into Ben. It will now basic attack 1, EX1, and animation cancel it with his ult, so it'll land just before zeroed in runs out. With Ben still on field, use basic attack 1 and 2 to trigger Orphe's Aftershock, swap to her once it's done to use heat charge and Ben quick assist. If you have lighter M1 or higher, you'll use Ben EX1 and 2 to fill the remaining time since you'll still have Woodpecker and zeroed in active. Glider Lucy requires a lot more animation cancelling to optimize the rotation, which may or may not cause frustration if Lucy doesn't want to cooperate. First, trigger the stun with Glider CX for King of the Summit, quick swap to Ben to use basic 1, EX1, and immediately animation cancel EX2 with Lucy's ult if it's available. Now use Ben's chain, Glider's chain for King of the Summit, then Lucy's chain last for Ben quick assist. Next, use basic 1, animation cancel EX1 with Lucy's EX or ult, and quick assist and ult with Ben. After Ben's ult, you will again basic 1, EX1, animation cancel with Lucy's EX, quick assist into Ben, and now you'll have exactly enough energy to perform another EX and EX follow-up. With any remaining time, you could either use lighter ult if you don't need it for days, or at M2, use its full morale meter. Ufa Astra is one of Ben's best epic carry teams, but it struggles with optimal stun rotations because there's not enough time to fit everything in. Since King of the Summit should already be active, we'll start the stun rotation with Ben basic 1, EX1, and EX2 into the first chain. If Ufu is available, then use her chain first, then Ben will go second to use the Woodpecker buffs, then Astra will go last. Now quick assist with Ben, refresh Woodpecker with basic 1, EX1, and EX2, and quick swap twice to get to Astra and use her ult. After Ben chain, animation cancel and knockback with Ben ult, which ends the stun rotation with the chain attack available to use on either Ben or Fufu. Ben's daily assault performance varies depending on the team composition and the boss you are facing, but the strategy remains mostly the same. For most stun support teams, you should plan on performing 3 optimal stun rotations where you will maximize decibel generation between Ben and his support before each stun. The goal is to reach 2200 decibels and a full energy meter on Ben, taking into account things like his defensive assist, which only costs 1 assist point, and the miasma shield, which replenishes half the energy meter. For example, if you have 2 assist points remaining, use one on Ben and the other on your support to generate more decibels. You try to keep King of the Summit up throughout the fight since it'll help Ben deal more on-field damage with skills like his block counter and defensive assist. Since you will often build days too quickly using your stunner's ult before you are prepared for the rotation, it's usually better to use it for damage during stun or to break the miasma shield faster. You could opt to stun the boss twice before they enter the miasma phase, either because you already generated a lot of decibels like with the priest, or when you are looking to build decibels for the next stun rotation that comes after the miasma phase, though you are more reliant on RNG to reach a total of 4 stuns with this strategy. When dealing with the miasma phase, remember to take advantage of dodge assists even if it's not a yellow attack, and to use your energy to dip below 50% before it breaks. Unlike a Shiyu Defense, Ben can use double support and focus much more on optimizing on-field DPS, though instead of trying to hold on to energy and ultimates for stun, you'll simply use them as they come unless you are close to stunning. This means his rotations will be varied, so you're mostly focusing on buff uptime and maximizing his on-field damage. You'll have plenty of energy to work with if you're using his main combos, especially EX block counter in the basic 2 and 3, and remember that his block counter is stronger than the EX follow-up. If you're using a different team than the ones I reviewed earlier, you can take a look at my document which lists stun rotations and performance for every one of Ben's teams, link in the description. These scores are collected buffless, so you can expect a 10 to 15% score increase based on the buffs available. Just don't mind the elephant in the room. Let's take a look at how Ben is played in Shiyu Defense. Shiyu Defense favors Ben because he can take advantage of his burst damage and high interrupt to control and defeat enemies quickly, which means he doesn't have to face fire weak enemies to perform well enough to S rank, though it still requires some strategy and planning. One way to make the smaller waves easier to deal with is by pushing the enemies together with dash or basic attacks, prevent them from moving with the stunner EX and or Orphe's heat charge, then have Ben help by performing block counters or defensive assists to continuously interrupt and whittle them down. Keep in mind which enemy is either harder to stun or has more HP, as that will be the target you prioritize your stronger skills on, and don't be shy about using your energy since you will have some time to get energy back before stunning the boss. Another tip is to stagger the stuns so you can use more than just 2 chain attacks to deal with them, like you would with Palicus, and it helps generate decibels for your stun in particular. The strong one would have the small waves clear within 30 seconds, stun the boss before the first minute, perform the stun rotation as normal, then use whatever's left before the massive phase to get the most out of the score multiplier. If you can't stun the boss within the first 70 seconds, plan to use whatever you have during the 5 times multiplier instead of saving it for later. With the help of dodge assisting during the massive phase, you could potentially break it faster to land within a higher skill multiplier as well as a stun following it. How long you take to clear the stage is a lot less important than maximizing the high score multipliers early on, and the TV brain can have a big part in how well you succeed. You're much more incentivized to bring a stunner with high burst stage like Dial In and Lighter because they're much more effective for stunning within the first minute to maximize the value of your resources. For those running Ben on field with double support, you'll look to maximize your block counter usage and once again use energy and ultimates as they come, making sure to animation cancel as much as you can. Speaking of team comps, let's review them to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. Having the right comp will enable Ben to clear endgame content even as boss HP continues to rise. The most balanced team composition will include a stunner and a support, but there are different flavors of each that cater to a different type of playstyle. While double stun is an option, it doesn't quite work the same as it would with Soldier 11 since Ben doesn't have strong basic attacks and greatly depends on energy. The current best stunners for Ben are Lighter and Dial In since they greatly buff Ben and have excellent days output, but the most commonly seen choice is Lighter. Lighter's morale is essential for increasing his impact and heavily buffing fire damage, which is crucial for Ben's stun rotations. Though he does struggle with days on demand, it is often misused even at the top level. The main drawback is that it de-incentivizes using Ben on field because his basic attacks deal physical damage, which can cause conflict with who gets more field time. Lighter Lucy still clears endgame content and has the lowest commitment due to being so cost effective, though you may need to consider mindscapes on Lighter to keep up with the HP inflation if you're going to keep using him. While Lucy can be frustrating at times, like whiffing the enemy, whiffing the boars, or struggling to get past Ben's glorious fat body, she's still pretty good at dealing damage and provides strong buffs that complement Ben such as combat attack. Orphe is basically the upgrade to Lucy because she's got much more damage and consistency while also providing an attack buff, but Orphe will almost always outdamage Ben, especially in a lighter Orphe team. Expect the damage distribution to be about 35 to 45% Ben and 45 to 55% Orphe. Bernice is a niche choice if you want to use Inferno Metal, but it often falls short even to lighter Lucy because they already have decent fire application and anomaly timing alongside Rockaboo, but there's a case for M2 Bernice being good when stacking pen ratio. The next stunner to recommend is Dial In because she greatly evens the playing field between Ben and Orphe with the extra ultimates, and provides very similar buffs as Lighter. She's more viable than Lighter as an outfield stunner since she can combo enhanced basics between her EX specials, which frees up Ben for more defensive assists, and buffs Ben's fire and physical damage so he can be more effective on field, unlike with Lighter. While Dial-In and Lighter Orphe teams are very on par with each other, you can usually skew in favor of Dial-In depending on how well her additional ability is maximized, or when the enemy is both fire and fist weak. The downside is that Dial-In needs Orphe to activate her additional ability, which is a major portion of her kit's strength. So while Dial-In Astra may sound appealing at first, you'd be better off choosing a different stunner. Fufu doesn't have the same level of daze output as the others, but she still does quite a bit of damage and uses very little field time. She's best paired with a support who also doesn't need much field time to allow her Ben to hypercarry and utilize this high block counter damage, though I highly recommend getting 1 or 2 Mindscapes to stay ahead of the HP inflation. Just be careful about double Aftershock teams, as they can become challenging to keep track of which one was just activated. Trigger can be slotted in the same teams as Fufu, but her damage output is noticeably weaker, with most of her teams failing to S-rank Shiyu Defense at M0. With many fire-weak enemies being resistant to electric, you are less likely to have as much success overall. Jingyi, Kalita, and Polker are all the worst stunner options, even with Mindscapes, but if you really want to use them, then you can just let Orphe solve your problems or get more Mindscapes. Orphe comes up a lot because she elevates any of Ben's teams to the point of dominating most of the top 10 spots, covering for the lack of DPS while also supporting Ben, and helps to activate additional abilities that wouldn't be active otherwise because of Ben's class. If you decide to use her and want to vertically invest into Ben's teams, then go for others' Mindscapes first, then Orphe's, because hers are much lower impact. You could run her with 4P Astral if you're feeling a bit insecure about Ben's performance, but it's better to run 4P Shadow and let her do her thing. In terms of dedicated supports for Ben, both Yuzuha and Astra are great options, but because the premium centers can't activate their additional abilities with them, it's not as common to see them used with Ben. Nicole Astra is still a pretty solid team, but they somewhat rely on facing either weak enemies or Mindscapes to keep up. They're good to use until you can save up for stronger options like Lighter and Orphe. Zhao is quite similar in power to Astra without Shul, though her element is often resisted and still underperforms in most cases to make it a worthwhile choice. While Caesar was Ben's strongest teammate at one point, with both stun and support capabilities, she has fallen off too much because of her low damage and mediocre days. Ben's free-to-play team with Lucy and Nicole requires such high disc investment and skill optimization that clearing with them is more of a flex than anything, but it can be used to learn how to optimize Ben's on-field damage and practice his combos to inch out every bit of score possible. If you want to play a more unique Ben team, or want to compare team performance as well as Mindscapes, you can view the data in my calculator, which includes a combined rating score based on how they feel to play, their performance, and level of recommendation. For a simple overview of which agents to invest into, you can use this tier list, which ranks the value of each agent for Ben. Most agents will see the biggest performance increase at M1, but M2 teammates will almost guarantee you would clear in in-game content. For those who are keen on team cost, Ben would naturally lower the cost being an A rank and using engines like Trogam or Steel Cushion, so you could afford to give the team a Mindscape or 2 to make it a standard 6 cost team like the other limited S ranks are. While having Ben's best teammates is a great start, you still need to know how to optimize their gameplay to get the most out of their kits. Lighter is very dependent on his morale to gain impact, which can lead to bad habits such as using too much of Ben's energy to fill the morale meter. Ben's energy is quite important for his burst damage, so either Lucy or Orphe should be the primary battery source for Lighter's morale, since their energy regen and gameplay objectives favor spending their energy, unlike Ben with his more structured rotations. Another point people forget is that a signature engine requires that he enters the field through an assist in order to gain the impact necessary to max the elation buff, so you either need a defensive assist or a quick assist before activating morale. Make sure to use at least 80 morale for the full elation buff, because each hit doesn't just reset the timer, but also updates the damage bonus based on how much impact he has. You can save time by doing his basic attack finisher a little early, rather than go for the powerful finisher, since it consumes a fair bit by itself, most useful when you want to catch a defensive assist. Although you just need 80 morale to max elation, Lighter's impact can increase all the way until consuming 100 morale. So if you start morale with less than full, then you could use a shuffle EX just before he runs out to max the impact buff for his ultimate. You could also shuffle EX into morale if you didn't have enough after using his assist. Just don't partially use Lighter's morale once you start it. While you can simply ignore Orphe for the most part and still greatly benefit from her as an off-field DPS, there are still some things to watch out for. You can increase DPS by utilizing your EX to basic 5 combo between her aftershocks every 5 seconds. Orphe's Crimson Vortex is easy to accidentally cancel when trying to combo into Heat Charge, so you should look for when she starts to descend from the skill before activating it. Like Heat Charge, her ultimate gives a quick assist, but you can spam the character swap button to avoid the prompt, which can speed up the rotation a little. With Shadow Harmony, her Sig, and Ben's crit buff, Orphe only needs 9 crit rate subs, or 26.6% before combat to reach max crit rate, so when paired with Dial-In, you could focus more on attack with 2-piece Astral and substats. Dial-In's additional ability increases her EX damage based on the attack of the agent before her, so you could see an increase of 2k in DA just by putting Orphe before Dial-In instead of Ben. Dylan's Get Lost is pretty useful for dealing extra days, especially since it's not needed to upgrade a chain into ult during stun, and it gives a quick assist into the previous agent, so you should look to use a customer complaint before activating ult to replenish it. Make sure to swap out of the animation if you have 90 points, and don't hold down basic for too long during stun or else you will force a chain attack instead. To get the most consistent days out of her, use her 2 enhanced basics after Rock and Scissors, and wait to use Get Lost and ult until after EX Paper, where she will have the most days from a signature engine. Everyone loves to hate on Lucy, but most of her issues can be mitigated. Lucy's boars often struggle to land because they are being body blocked by another agent in front of her, so you should sidestep with the dash before activating her EX, which also makes it easier to follow up the EX with a dash attack to replenish some energy. If you have problems with keeping your buff active out of stun, it can be worthwhile to perform the long EX press to get more duration, and can be easily animation cancelled with something like Lighter's own quick assist. Sometimes, Lucy's EX will swing at nothing, which can happen when her boars can't be positioned properly, so try to avoid being too close to the wall to hopefully prevent this from happening. Nicole's objective is to ensure that Ben's skills like block counter and defensive assist land while the defense shred is active, and while she is energy intensive, there are ways to make the uptime easier to manage and keep her energy levels high. One of the easier methods is a basic 3 before quick stomping into Ben, but if at any point you gain enough energy and are about to be attacked, you can cancel the basic animation with the dodge, then EX and defensive assist into Ben at the same time. You could also opt to perform the EX hold instead to give Ben more fuel time before needing to swap again. To keep her energy up, rather than activate the quick assist from EX right away, you should dash attack before using my quick assist, and make use of her ultimate and chain attack to save energy for later. A little fun fact is that Nicole's energy field snapshots her stats once the skill is released, meaning that even if she gains or loses any buffs during the energy field's duration, the damage will not change. The damage will, however, update with stun multiplier and effects that are applied to the enemy, such as Caesar's Dead End and the Vault, which debuff the enemy to take more damage. Just another reason why Nicole is so strong of an agent. Have you ever wondered why the boss keeps walking backwards instead of attacking? They don't like it when you invade their personal space, and sometimes just get confused about how to attack you, so if you see this happening, just move away from them and they'll start attacking you again. Every agent needs a complementary engine to support their objectives, so we're looking for an engine that boosts the key aspects of Ben's kit, making use of his naturally high attack and motion values in his EX and ultimate. Of the current defense engines, there are only a few noteworthy ones: Trigam, Bunnyband, and Tusk of Fury. Dragon Vessel is the strongest free-to-play engine because it has high attack and boosts EX and ult damage by 40%, solidifying its role as the highest burst damage engine until they finally let us have a strong S-rank defense engine. It works best if you can support it with enough crit value, so I recommend getting as close to 70% crit rate as possible for consistency, especially since you can supplement crit damage from other agents. It's often used alongside Dial-In because of the extra ultimates and flexibility with field time usage, and it supplies Ben with enough damage bonus to use pen ratio, though you may want to use Snapu R5 to guarantee he'll have enough. Ben could also run ER6 with Trigam to reduce the awkwardness of using field time to build energy and make stun rotations easier to execute, but you do trade off some damage for convenience. Dragon's older brother, Bunnyband, is surprisingly a great contender because of its 16% combat attack. It does suffer from having a defense main stat, and depends on a shield being active, which is expensive, and can be easily broken due to how little shield he provides. Tusk of Fury lacks damage compared to the other 2 defense engines, but it makes up for it by providing a lot of utility for him and his team in Shiyu Defense, where it is such a crucial factor for high scores. If you want to wail on just Ben, getting this engine to R5 would be a large improvement to his team overall, since the 36% damage bonus affects everyone, at the cost of attack percent as the main stat, but you will likely run into issues of stunning too quickly. Big Cylinder is at the bottom of the list since it can't proc bonus damage during stun without enemies around to attack, and it has a weak main stat. A common point of failure for these defense engines is that they are very situational and lack crit value. Like combat attack, crit value is a damage multiplier, but it's more like investing into consistency or your average damage, which matters a lot when you want less RNG and RNG heavy fights such as the Priest. Even though the weapon class doesn't match, Ben can use the crit main stat on engines to increase his average damage and makes building him much easier, unlike other options like Trigun that focus on specific parts of the kit. With crit rate and crit damage being more balanced the closer to a 1-to-2 ratio you can manage, with there being so many sources of crit damage from agents, King of the Summit, and endgame buffs, crit rate becomes more valuable than almost any other stat Ben can equip, especially for how hard crit rate is to come by from outside sources. It's already evident based on how close Hailstorm Shrine is to Trigam in power, especially when there's usually a fair bit of damage bonus already on the team and from endgame buffs. Hailstorm Shrine has a wide margin over Steel Cushion because of its higher base attack, and with the way things are going for Miyabi, maybe you get more use out of it on Ben because he deserves the best there is to offer.
Fine.
You may also opt for a crit damage main stat engine, which is particularly useful if you use a friend of metal to substitute crit rate. One more engine to take note of is Fusion Compiler, or Reaping Cradle, for their pen ratio main stat. It's quite similar to Trigram in the way that it needs high crit value to make it worthwhile compared to crit engines, but it's much more niche. Some bosses in particular, like Wandering Hunter, have 1588 defense compared to the standard 953 to shield for Rupture agents. But what if Ben became somewhat of a Rupture agent himself? When this engine is combined with pen ratio slot 5 and 2-piece buffer, he can reach a total of 56% pen ratio by himself. Since pen ratio becomes more valuable the more of it you have, and defense impacts damage quite significantly, this is one of the few cases where it becomes the strongest engine for Ben, potentially increasing DA score by 2 to 3k in teams that provide sufficient damage bonus. If you're looking for the easiest engine to build around, stick to crit engines. For something more specific, you have the option of Trigram or Fusion Compiler. This also applies to those running him as a support, since his value comes from his damage, not just his buff. With the engine you choose to support Ben's objectives, disk drives are like the tools in his toolkit, giving him the means to more efficiently accomplish what he's best at. Disk drives greatly influence Ben's playstyle, whether this being strong on-field, doubling down on his burst damage capabilities, or relying on outside mechanics like Burr and a quick assist to boost his damage. The option you'll almost always see me use is Woodpecker, because combat attack is such a powerful stat that it's hard to come by and it's easy to build stacks. Even though Woodpecker isn't the highest stun damage option, they can quickly build 2 stacks on his own with basic 1 and EX1, with his low-cost EX and multi-hit attacks making it easier to maintain both in and out of stun. Keep in mind that each stack requires landing a critical hit from his basic attack, EX, or dodge counter, which is another reason why equipping a crit rate engine is so impactful. Astral Voice is great if you want to avoid managing Woodpecker and also buff some of the team, but it takes a while to ramp up and can be difficult to retain the stacks. The more damage bonus there is on the team, the less effective this set becomes due to diminishing return, unlike Combat Attack, which isn't very saturated. One Punk was often considered the strongest attack disc set, and Ben can use it with effective routing in Shiyu Defense, but it's not strong enough to justify avoiding Ben when much of his kit wants him to be on field. Buffer can work well if you use Dial In, but it doesn't outperform Woodpecker played optimally in stun and has much lower uptime across the fight. Last but not least is Inferno Metal, one of the strongest sets due to its incredible crit value and up to an 18-second duration. This set requires timing burn to happen just before stun, but it's often held back by low fire application or increased max anomaly buildup on bosses. Since it is difficult to control and sacrifices a lot of damage when it's not active because of how you would build around this set, I don't recommend using it unless you know what you are doing. If you don't have a particular preference, then the most well-rounded choice is Woodpecker, with Astral being a great secondary option. For those running him as a support, your best disc choice is Protopunk, since Ben is quite useful for defensive assists and deals decent damage with it. Since the 2-piece sets are so equal in value, other than Woodpecker being the best, you should choose the one with better substats. Buffer is usually preferred when stacking pen ratio, and Branching Blade is a great alternative if you already have a lot of damage bonus. Speaking of stats, what disc main stats should you prioritize? Choosing the right main stat greatly depends on who you're running with and what build you use, so here are some rules of thumb to follow. With the crit rate engine or Inferno Metal, crit rate slot 4 is preferred until you have at least 12 crit rate substats, at which point you should use crit damage in either slot 4 or the engine instead. Slot 5 should almost always be fire damage, but there are cases where this is not the best option. If you can achieve more than 90% damage bonus without it, you can increase damage against bosses stacking pen ratio instead because of diminishing returns. If pen ratio is not viable due to low defense or defense shred, and you have an overabundance of damage bonus, about 150% or more, then you could run attack percent 5. Slot 6 should be attack percent since defense percent lacks value with there being more base attack than defense to scale with, and Ben's defense scaling in combat is not very impactful. Energy regen 6 is typically used alongside Dragon Vessel if energy is the main issue, but it could also work with Ben as a sub DPS to block Hunter more frequently. For substats, crit rate and crit damage are the main ones to look for, with attack percent being close behind. Counting those 3 as whole substats, you should aim for at least 30 substats in total, especially since he needs more investment than most. My calculations of field tests use 12 crit rate, 12 crit damage, and 6 attack percent subs to have a more fair comparison between all agents and equipment, and more accurately reflects the current average. Even just a few substats can shave off seconds from a run, so don't neglect them for too long, even under supports. Many have asked why defense percent isn't as good as attack despite the defense conversion and scaling in his kit. Well, according to the official damage formula, the additional attack is considered to be an additive bonus, not an increase on his base value. When looking at how Ben's attack is calculated in a detailed level, his base attack value not only includes the 25 attack from cores A, C, and E, but also the base attack of the engine equipped. With Big Cylinder equipped and max core skill, the base value of Ben's attack is now 1276, while his base defense remains at 724, a 27% difference more or less based on the engine. Since you're only gaining 80% of the value of defense, it would take a lot of additional help to make you stronger than attack, but there's more to it than just that. Taking a look at the additional damage at his block counter, there's the 976% defense scaling from Big Cylinder, and another 300% from M2 as additional damage. When comparing the damage of Ben's EX block counters between Big Cylinder and Hailstorm Shrine, there's an average difference of 26k per block counter in favor of Big Cylinder, which is pretty pathetic. In a full storm rotation with Lighter Lucy, Hailstorm tops Big Cylinder with a 380k damage lead on average. That would take about 15 EX block counters with Big Cylinder between stuns just to break even, which isn't realistic to achieve, not to mention the damage lost to almost every other skill in his kit. Even if you almost exclusively played him for block counters like a sub DPS or support, it's better to run a standard main DPS build than to stack defense. The defense multipliers would have to be much stronger for it to be worthwhile, which I hope gets revisited as Endless considers buffing A ranks in the future. While Ben has great skill multipliers to work with and cost-effective EXs to support his objectives, he still relies too much on his energy to perform his role efficiently and has a noticeable lack of energy regen compared to supports. Ben can be played as an on-field or burst DPS because his EXs are so strong, but he can't do much else when his basic attacks deal physical damage and his animations are quite long, making it harder to optimize. Ben requires a fair bit of practice to get the animation cancels and rotations down just right, but it can work to his advantage and make things interesting, unlike his class identity which doesn't know what it wants to be. After many months of power creep and HP inflation, people often say that most have given up on Ben. He's one of the weakest agents in the game. It even Hoyo gaslights you into building Ben the wrong way. Yet when we look at real player data, it tells a different story. Pridewind continues to update their usage data and Shiyu Defense and TA each cycle, so we can understand what their average performance is like, regardless if their takes are controversial. While Ben may be one of the lowest played agents, Bengenda is still quite healthy compared to the old days of Endless. I'm proud to say that there are many people playing DPS Ben, as seen by the high usage rate of Ben's best teammates such as Lighter, Orphe, Dylan, and Lucy. Even when supporting the likes of Anton or Evelyn, people are correctly building him for high burst damage with Trigram or crit engines, and use 4-piece Whiphager or Inferno Metal. People also prioritize crit, pen ratio, and attack percent, making use of defense as a better substat than as a main stat. The average stats are quite impressive as well, having an average of over 3,300, and a near 1 to 2 crit ratio at 65 to 135, implying a total substat range in the 30s. The people that still play Ben really enjoy him, and give him the best they can to perform well as a damage dealer. This is what it means to spread the Bengenda, continuing to play Ben and give him the best even when there are stronger options available. It's all thanks to you that I can be a source of inspiration and knowledge for many Ben mains, and it truly makes me happy to know that there are many people just like me that are crazy enough to main Ben that I can be of help to. Even if my guide may be late, I hope that anyone who still wants to try Ben will give him a chance, with the knowledge that I have passed on and continue to spread the Bengenda. Ben is the agent you play, not because he's a meta choice, and not because he's particularly strong by himself, but because he's fun to play and challenging to optimize. So when he finally performs, it's guaranteed to be one hell of a fight and feel quite rewarding. He will always be Ben Biggest if you continue to believe in him and make a statement that you don't need to chase the meta to have fun playing the way you want to. You are always welcome to participate in the Bengenda, as you are now fully equipped to handle whatever challenges you may face on this journey. I will continue to post my Ben clears and do whatever I can to elevate him. So subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and consider joining our Discord to hang out with the rest of us. Otherwise, congratulations on becoming Ben certified, and thanks for watching. Class is dismissed.